Jai Shri Krishna, Namaste, and welcome to Chitti Media and the Festival of Bharat channels. Today I'm joined with a very special guest. This gentleman has dedicated over 3 decades of his life to dharmic causes. He is an author of many books. He is a fantastic speaker, an eminent speaker on Indic studies, and he's the founder of the Infinity Foundation. I would like to warmly welcome our esteemed guest, Rajiv Malhotra ji. Rajiv ji, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on your show. It's been a long time. We haven't met in person for I don't know how many years, but it's good
Since
to meet you.
2018, I introduced your talk at the Oxford University event. You were at the British Parliament. You did a fantastic speech. So much has happened since we last met.
Yes, and we have to catch up. Maybe my new book tour will bring me to the UK one more time.
Absolutely. Actually, Pandit Satish Sharma said he will be helping you launch the book in the UK, so we can definitely meet after one of those events. I'll be there for sure. But I'd like to really thank you for picking Chitti Media to bring your book, premiere your book, your new book to the public, to our viewers. You have a fantastic book that's just come out. It's an interesting title, actually, Rajiv ji, The Snakes of the Ganga. Can you let us know who you're referring to with these snakes?
Well, we expect the Ganga is a safe place. If I'm bathing in the Ganga, it's a very sacred place, and the people around me are good people. I don't expect that they are dangerous. I don't expect that there's anything poisonous there because of the nature of the Ganga. So we are talking about ideas that are dangerous, that are poisonous, people that are very dangerous, and institutions. So we are talking about ideas, individuals, institutions that are very dangerous and trying to dismantle India and its civilization, but they're hidden. The metaphor of the snakes is danger and harm and poison. And the metaphor of the Ganga is that we don't see this kind of a negativity, we just see positive things. So these are people that are well known and they are iconic. Some of them are winners of Padma awards, and they are the Indians think of them as very patriotic, and for the most part they are. And these individuals have supported ideas that are dangerous and supported institutions that are dangerous. So snakes in the Ganga is a metaphor for hidden stealth danger in the form of ideas, institutions, and individuals.
Wow, sounds like a book of revelations. And the by title of the book is Breaking India 2.0. Can you tell us what that means?
So my first book, one of my early books that became a very influential one, was called Breaking India, and that exposed the activities of the church in India, trying to create a breakaway activity, a breakaway identity, an identity of Indians that are not Indian in their allegiance, and also the Dravidian movement in the south, trying to break up the sense of a unified nation. And that did very well because it woke up a lot of people. In the beginning, it was controversial. A lot of people said it's dangerous, it's risky, you are stereotyping. I was attacked by our own people who felt that we should not be so controversial. But gradually, these very people started jumping on the bandwagon. And today, you will see hundreds of people running their video channels, including this one, I must say, and many others that were inspired by what that book had to say. So it took about a dozen years for the book to turn into a movement, and now nobody denies the core thesis of Breaking India. So Breaking India 2.0 is that it says that now things have changed. In many ways, the entire bandwagon of all the activists, people who have all these video channels and who go on having manthans and literary festivals and talks and so on about Breaking India, are kind of obsolete. And the reason they're obsolete is they're still focusing on the same things which I brought out, 10, 15, 20 years ago, while the world has changed. There are completely new threats. It's a new age. It's the age of artificial intelligence. It's the age where the global left and wokeism have taken over. There are completely new nexuses, and we focus on Harvard as the nest of snakes. If I may use a snake metaphor, I would say that is the nest where the snakes are being bred, and that's where the snakes are being trained and exported from. So Breaking India 2.0 says, the reason I use Breaking India in that is it's linked to the threat and the danger, so people know what it's about. People have understood the Breaking India thesis. And the 2.0 says that the old 1.0 is obsolete. You got to upgrade yourself. So that's why we have this byline.
Fantastic. No, that sounds really, really interesting. Now, your first chapter, you've named the Americanization of Marxism. So let us know, when do you think the Marxism got Americanized? How, when, and how does this actually concern India?
So it's a very, very important question. People think that America is the last place that would get Marxist in its ethos, become Marxist. And Marxism is a sort of anti-American. But what has happened is there was something called the Frankfurt School of Marxism in Germany during World War II. And they were trying to explain why Germany did not go communist and why it went to the Nazis. When they had a depression, they had an economic depression, a lot of unemployment, a lot of turmoil. According to Marxists, the Marxist theory, the proletariat should have moved up and revolted and taken over the country, like in Russia, but that didn't happen. So they needed an alternative theory, and they amended Marxism. I won't go into the details, but it's in the book. They amended Marxism, and that became known as the Frankfurt School. And this amended Marxism explained, why Germany did not have a communist revolution, but it had a fascist revolution. That was a very important kind of a movement. Now, because these people from the Frankfurt School had to leave Germany, they had to leave Germany for political reasons, for their own safety, they came to the United States. And that's where a new story begins, which is not well known. Some of them arrived in Columbia University in New York, and some of them arrived in Berkeley in California. And so one gentleman in particular, Herbert Marcuse, is very important. He spent a long time, he was a young man when he came to Berkeley. He spent a long time developing a kind of an Americanized version of Marxism. So he noticed that there were race riots. He noticed that there were many different ethnic communities in California, and they all had different problems. And there was this hidden racism with white supremacy at the top, invisible sometimes, and sometimes very conscious, very open. And there were all these racial minorities. So this Americanized version of Marxism was no longer about economic classes. It was also about races, because traditional Marxism is not race against race. It is an economic class against another economic class. And Marx was very clear. He did not want to differentiate among the classes or among the races. He wanted to differentiate only among economic strata. Right. So the Americanization of Marxism is where this business of thesis and antithesis, and the antithesis has to fight and bring down the thesis in a revolution, in a violent revolution, so that there'll be a new thesis emerging. That kind of a theory was now being applied for the first time to race. So it's race that has to rise and take over another race, take over the power from another race. And this is the Americanization of Marxism. Now, this Americanized Marxism later got turned into something called critical race theory. And this critical race theory stayed underground. It was only known in very limited leftist circles. Some academic people and a few people knew about it, but it was never taken seriously by the mainstream until the Black Lives Matter movement took on. And that happened with the killing of George Floyd. Yes. There was so much sympathy. Everybody was wanting to support the Black Lives Matter movement. So that is when the Marxists took over the Black Lives Matter movement and used the Black Lives Matter movement to bring critical race theory into the mainstream. So the Americanization of Marxism is now in the form of critical race theory, which is being taught in schools and colleges, and it is everywhere. And you cannot be a liberal and not be supporting critical race theory, which means Marxism. So that is the Marxist chip inside. Marxism is the chip inside, the DNA of the critical race theory. And critical race theory's popular name is wokeism. That's the popular form. the critical race theory is more like an intellectual theoretical form.
That was actually one of my questions later on, to describe what is this critical race theory, but you've explained that beautifully. In your book as well, you give a detailed rebuttal to a book that was written by someone called Isabella Wilkerson, where she claims that casteism is racism. Could you summarize your points on that?
Yeah, it is important to have sympathy for the underclass, the underdogs in every culture, but they are separate histories, and that doesn't mean that sympathizing with people who are Black Americans requires that you take that same history and impose it on India. That would be that's a huge blunder that people are making. American history of race is a product of America's own history, its own the origins in Christianity have a lot to do with this. When they came to the United States, they thought this is the Eden, the biblical paradise. So they had all these kind of images, and the way they treated the Native Americans has a lot to do with this. They wanted their land, and there was a huge racism-based genocide. And so the blacks were brought for economic reasons, for slavery, and then it turned into a black versus white racial kind of a whole discourse and a political system. Now in India, the biases are two kinds. The schism among communities are of two kinds. One is indigenous, where different jatis emerged, and they've had periods of tension and periods of harmony, and the jati structure is not the same throughout the India. So forget about being universal and same as racism. Even within India, the jatis in Assam and in Bengal and South and in Punjab, they are all very different. And in some cases, you have a certain domination. In some cases, you don't. And also historically, things have changed. There were jatis that were doing very well that came down for various reasons. So the history of jati as a construct of community identity, and how it has evolved, and how there is domination and subjugation within that structure, and then it balances out. There is a revolution from within, and things change out. That's a very Indian phenomenon. It has nothing to do with the American phenomenon. The second area of identity conflict is foreign invasions. So the foreign invasions came from the Middle East. There was the Islamic invasion that lasted, 1,000 years, and then there was the Europeans. So these foreign invaders brought their identity, their racial superiority, their religious superiority, their linguistic superiority, which was imposed. So you have this internal, schism, and you have this external thing that made it even worse. So India is far more complex than just saying blacks versus whites. It's not so simple. And to say that Brahmins are the whites of India and the Dalits are the blacks of India is actually a disgrace. And then to say further that the Muslims are part of the Dalit movement and they are being oppressed is nonsense, because Muslims are the invaders who came and oppressed and imposed their religion. Whether they were ethnically foreigners who came or whether they were converted later, but the point is that they joined a foreign religion, a foreign language, allegiance to the Middle East. That's their holy land. And the point is that you cannot say that this is the underclass. Okay, they may be numerically a minority, but in terms of the power structure, they had the power structure over the majority. The equivalent thing in America would be if blacks had invaded as a minority, taken over the whites, ruled over them for 1,000 years, oppressed them, imposed African languages on them, and imposed African religions on them. And now we would be saying, oh, okay, they are the oppressor. Of course, nobody would go for that. So while in the United States, the numerical minority have been oppressed historically, in India, the numerical minority, be it the Muslims who came from the Middle East and ruled for 1,000 years, or the Christians who came from Britain and ruled for 200-300 years, they are not the underclass. And even today, they are part of the global nexus. I mean, they are funded as part of their global nexus, be it the church, which is very powerful. Maybe it's a small minority in India, but it's not a minority globally. And it's certainly funded and given political support, given media support, lobbying and all that. And that is hardly similar to, say, the African American. Because the African American, I feel really sympathetic for them. They're not part of a global nexus of Africa ruling the world. They're not like that. So
No.
they need our sympathy. But I think, and this by the same token, I will say the Dalits need our sympathy, because if they have been oppressed and if there are cases of discrimination and bias, which there are, and these are systemic, we have to change them. But we cannot diagnose a disease in the United States and impose that diagnosis on every other civilization, because they have their own problems, they have their own histories. If you go to Mexico, the history of oppression is very different. It's not black versus white. If you go to China, it's very different. It's not black versus white. So this business of Americanizing the social structure of another country is an act of arrogance, and therefore I oppose this business of saying that caste equals racism, because it certainly doesn't. And what caste equal racism is trying to achieve is privilege the American liberal scholars in places like Harvard, the American left, privilege them as the people who will control the discourse of in India. Because once you've translated casteism in terms of the racist framework, what you've done is turned it over to those who control that framework. And now people in India, when they want to learn something about caste, be it the Supreme Court or be it somebody else in education, they'll have to go to Harvard and get direction on what to think about caste. That's a recolonization of India. That's a recolonization of the social sciences and humanities of India by saying that all of this should be mapped onto an American framework. Americans have enough problems of our own here in this country, and there's no sense in exporting this kind of a rhetoric and bringing divisiveness and conflict within another country. So for all these reasons, I oppose this.
Yes, it sounds like Isabella Wilkerson built her hypotheses completely on a debunked colonial tropes. But moving on, you focus on Harvard quite a bit in your book as well, as being a global nexus producing anti-India, breaking India poison. Why Harvard? And are there any other universities, do you think, as well, doing the same thing, being anti-Hindu?
So I've been surveying this for a very long time. I've been very close to Harvard because, when my foundation started out, we treated them as friends. We gave them grants. We had Indology conferences. We funded visiting professorships multiple times, gave them over 100,000 a year each time for a visiting professorship. So we did a lot of projects at Harvard. And I mentioned that in a big chapter, my history of dealing with Harvard. So it's not like I'm ignorant. I'm very involved with lots of people in Harvard, and I appreciate a lot of good things about Harvard also. But the bias that Harvard has against India is very old. From the beginning, their view towards China and their view towards India has been very different, and that's because the Chinese managed Harvard. Indians did not manage Harvard. So there's a huge chapter in this book on how China is treated at Harvard and how the Chinese have funded different things at Harvard to promote their ideology and their point of view. And India has done exactly the opposite. India has given them the money and let Harvard define the discourse. And the Indians who've gone there are the leftist anti-India people. This has become worse during the Modi era, but it was also bad during the previous era. They were anti-Indian civilization to begin with. They were bringing in Khalistanis, Kashmir separatists. Anyone who has a gripe against India would be welcome at Harvard. So we decided that, and Harvard has the power like no other place in terms of its global brand, in terms of how they train the government in India. The Indian government sends IAS people and Indian Foreign Service people for training on governance in Harvard. So imagine that Harvard is training how to govern India. It's like Oxford used to train the British people how to govern India. Now Harvard is doing that. And we have discussed that in this book. And Harvard is also developing policies on various issues in India, all kind of issues in India, and teaching. They are the ones who feed Washington. They are the ones who feed the Congress, the Senate, the White House, the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. All this discussion on whether India is religiously free or not, all these discussions on how democracy is going down in India, they start at Harvard. So what starts at Harvard doesn't stay at Harvard. And it has more influence than anyone else. And this is why we picked Harvard. And we came up with some shocks about the extent to which Indian billionaires are behind all this by funding them.
I was going to ask you about that a little later, but how does this all impact the people of Indian origin in the United States?
So, what has happened is this critical race theory has morphed into critical caste theory. So there are groups here encouraged by this whole left wing ecosystem. One of them is called Equality Labs, based in New York, funded by all these sort of people, huge funding, and there are others. They are claiming that caste is race, and this whole they've developed from critical race theory, they've developed a critical caste theory, and that is what's being taught everywhere. You will find American congressmen and senators who 5 years ago never heard of this are quoting this all over the place. And so there's litigation going on in Silicon Valley against Indians who are in management positions by calling them Brahmins who are exploiting Dalits. So this business that the caste abuse has entered the United States because of the Indian diaspora. The Indian diaspora has brought in caste, and this whole theory that the Aryans created this origin of this caste system, and it is embedded in the Vedas, and then the British learnt it in India, and the British are the ones who brought it to America and started racism because of their knowledge of caste in India, and then the Germans learnt it from there. So all this is so much nonsense, and that you have to go to the root. Where is it coming from? Who is behind all this? And that is Harvard. Today, it is Harvard more than anyone else, which is perpetuating this. And they are creating this ideology, and they are bringing in a lot of young people and brainwashing them into this mode. Some of them are already brought because they are anti-India, and so Harvard gives them respectability, gives them dignity, gives them money, gives them a home, gives them a podium to big microphone, to a big speaker system to broadcast to the world. So Harvard has unparalleled power to dismantle India intellectually. And all these things that we heard about, this dismantling Hindu phobia, all of that kind of Hindutva, dismantling Hindutva conference that happened a year or two ago. People didn't dig deep enough to figure out where is all this coming from. There are spokespersons all over here, there, and there. Somebody like an Audrey Truske is a tiny, small fry. She doesn't invent much on her own, but she's supported by a whole ecosystem. So you got to, and in Rutgers is not some big, mighty ecosystem. They're just a few regular professors who, in the bigger scheme of things, are not even that important. But what happens is the mothership of Harvard is breeding this knowledge, having conferences where such people come in. All these petitions with the Harvard name carry a lot of weight. So the book has about 40%, 50% of the pages are devoted to Harvard as the nest of snakes.
Yes, wow, because you do actually review a book by a Harvard professor who claimed that India's Institute of Technologies were actually oppressing Dalits. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a professor, Ajanta Subramanian, I mean, herself elitist. She's had a very elitist education in India, and she's holding a very prestigious, post in at Harvard. She's written this book called the Caste of Merit or something. I have a copy somewhere here. So she this book says the whole thesis is on IITs. It says that it goes to the history of engineering in India and the rise of IITs, and basically it tries to make the case that the very DNA, the very tattva, the essence of IITs is Brahmanical, and it's oppressive of Dalits. And this is in the structure of the IITs. It's not like something little that you can reform. That's the very foundation of IITs. So what she's saying is that all these successful people, who are the CEOs in Silicon Valley, and Indians are doing very well, and we're all very proud of them. And all this IT industry and export industry, it's all export of Brahmanical supremacy, which then means racism. Because once you say casteism equals racism, then this whole thing has to come under the American law of racism. Now, this has legal ramifications. So there are workshops that Equality Labs and various other people are doing, workshops all over Silicon Valley, telling the American tech companies, tech giants, that they have to learn about casteism, and they have to have surveys of caste to see how many people belong to different castes, and if there is caste discrimination on salaries, and if there's caste discrimination on how many people on their board, how many people on their in their top management. So this caste consciousness is being taught by people who are promoting all this knowledge, and so the American tech giants don't know what to do. I mean, they don't want controversy. They believe in meritocracy. But Ajanta Subramanian's book says that meritocracy is a disguised way to mask racism and casteism and Brahmanical supremacy. So when you say we are hiring on merit, or when you say that IITs are admitting people based on a merit exam, she says that that's all nonsense, because really it's casteism and you're calling it merit. So she builds all this argument, which is hocus pocus. I don't think that. I think she just does a little cut paste from here and there in a very clever way, but she's supported by this whole Harvard ecosystem. It's people like her, Wilkerson, a few others that go on these, these
Yes.
famous shows.
Well, you mentioned in your book, you actually put a major chapter out to Suraj Dayal. You criticize him. Why
Yes.
is he so important?
So Suraj Dayal is a young man at the Harvard Kennedy School as a fellow, and he has become black. We know that Bobby Jindal became the honorary white at wanting to enter politics as the honorary white. But guess what? Now we have also honorary blacks. So if you look at his picture, he's got this afro, and that is not how he was when he arrived at Harvard. He was like a regular Indian-looking man, and now he's developed this afro, and he says that he's an African, he's a black, and he wants Dalits to say that they are blacks. So the African American community have embraced him because he's a very articulate man, very intelligent, very well spoken. I think there are a lot of great things about him. In fact, I've tried to reach out to him because I think a lot of things he says are actually true. A lot of the oppression he talks about is true, and it ought to be taken care of. But this business of becoming sort of Harvard's poster boy for what is called the Afro-Dalit identity, the Afro-Dalit hyphenated identity, that Dalits are really Africans, and this whole black-white racism of America has to be the lens through which to study the caste issues of India. He's championing that. In my earlier book, Breaking India, over a decade ago, I talked about Afro-Dalit, but no one took it seriously. And so no one nipped it in the bud. No one helped me nip it in the bud. So now this Afro-Dalit movement is all over the place. That is the heart of critical caste theory today. And so Suraj Dayal at Harvard is the key figure in championing on the world stage. And he's become very popular in India. The Indian left loves him. They bring him to all these lit fests, and he's a big hero. But there are so many flaws, I pointed out. His understanding of Buddhism is flawed. His understanding of Marxism is flawed. His understanding of Hinduism is flawed. He's got all these weird ideas about caste and the history of caste and this Aryan invasion and so on. I mean, I have a very large chapter taking his writings, which are prolific, and his videos, which are prolific, taking them point by point and giving a response. I mean, I'm not trying to censor anybody, silence anybody. They have a right to speak, and I have a right to respond. I want healthy debate. I invite them, and if you could bring them on to a forum where you moderate and we have a respectable discussion and we agree, disagree, I would welcome it. I would welcome it with Wilkerson. I would welcome it with Soundarya Rajan of Equality Labs. I would welcome it with Ajanta Subramanian at Harvard. I would welcome it with Dayal at Harvard. So all these people whose works I'm criticizing, I'm doing it in a very clinical, in a very analytical, academic way. There is no disrespect. There is no abusive language. I'm not accusing them or blaming them. I'm just saying that they're wrong. Their academic work is flawed. So Dayal is a very influential figure in that regard.
Right, that's interesting. Thank you very much for that. Now, moving on to part 2 of your book, which is your largest part, I believe, the largest part of the 4 inside your book. You talk about Indian billionaires sponsoring Harvard University and what they're actually sponsoring. Can you explain to our viewers some of this nexus of this Harvard University and Indian billionaires, please?
Yeah, first of all, I want to say that I want to tell the billionaires, I'm not trying to silence you. I'm not trying to attack you personally. You are good people in your personal lives. I know some of you, and I have great respect for you. Also, as industrialists, you created jobs, created a great Indian economy, and we're very proud of you. But when it comes to philanthropy, and I'm only talking about the philanthropy part, even within philanthropy, they're doing very good things. I mean, they're feeding Indian people, they're eliminating hunger, doing something for the downtrodden, the economic underclass. They're doing a lot of good work. But when within the philanthropy, they're funding liberal arts, social sciences, humanities, they're out of their league. They are good at automobile manufacturing. Somebody is the best steel manufacturer. Somebody is in pharmaceuticals. If they were to fund philanthropy in those areas, they would be really good. But they're funding philanthropy, which ends up having bringing in liberal arts models, and these liberal arts models bring in critical caste theory, and they bring in political issues concerning India, and in those areas, they funded Harvard, and produce some of the work being done is very anti-India and anti-Hindu. So, for instance, Anand Mahindra has funded what is called the Mahindra Humanities Center. Now, imagine you put your family name on it, and you put your millions of dollars on it, and it's all well known, and they are very proud that this billionaire is funding us. And then there is this Lakshmi Mittal and family South Asia Institute at Harvard. Big name, huge, $50 million to start with. Then there is this Piramal, for public health. Now, you would think that public health has no public health in an Indian funding public health in Harvard would be making sure they understand that India did a good job in COVID, that India is a great vaccine manufacturer, that India has actually used a lot of traditional methods, traditional medicine, Ayurveda, and so on to solve the problem, deal with the problem very cost effectively on a very large scale. In the India story of how it managed COVID is a major untold story. And you would think that somebody who's patriotic and funding public health in Harvard and having conferences on public health issues would focus on the positive. And you would think that they would be championing Ayurveda in the United States. But rather than that, it's the other way around. It's Harvard. The Piramal Center is part of the T.H. Chan School of Public Health, and T.H. Chan is a Chinese. A Chinese gave the largest ever donation to Harvard, and they created this T.H. Chan, which is named after the father of these people who are the billionaires in China. And so this T.H. Chan School of Public Health is Harvard's School of Public Health. So they are defining the discourse, and Piramal Center is a subset of that. It's a subsidiary. Imagine what a disgrace that the Indians are now sitting in a subsidiary or of a Chinese establishment within Harvard. I mean, so we are not calling the shots, and it's not promoting what is best for India in terms of image. We have written a lot. There's a chapter on the Piramal Center. We are not criticizing Mr. Piramal. He's a nice guy. I've met him. Ajay Piramal is a wonderful person. I just want people to know that. But their philanthropy, it seems that they're not controlling, that somebody else is controlling it. Maybe they wrote a check and they looked the other side, did not do what industrialists call due diligence. They're supposed to do due diligence. You would never invest in a factory without due diligence. Yeah. And so you would bring in subject matter experts, whether it's automobiles or steel or pharma, to do due diligence. They know that industry, and they would do diligence. And even after investing, you would get annual reports. Now, I don't know what kind of due diligence they did in liberal arts by bringing in good, solid people who know liberal arts before making these investments. And I'm not sure that they are doing any annual reports from an independent, neutral person, not Harvard itself giving them an annual report, which would be self-serving, but somebody like us, or somebody who speaks from the voice of the Bharatiya conscience and says that, okay, we will be your eyes and ears. We are not interfering. We have no authority to censor, but we will give you an annual report on what is being done in your name and with your money, and you ought to know that. And I don't know if they've ever done that. I'm talking about an independent report, and then they should make this report public and say, to tell the public, this is what's being done by us with our money at Harvard, and this is what an independent review says. Now, our book is basically an independent audit of what the billionaires are doing at Harvard and what they're doing unintentionally. I don't think they know about this necessarily, but their unintended consequences include a lot of mess for India, a lot of rhetoric about dismantling India, a lot of anti-India people being brought into Harvard at conferences and given money and given grants. So this breaking India force effectively and Hindu phobia force effectively has its origins in Harvard to a big extent, and the funding of Indians legitimizes this. Harvard goes around saying, such and such famous person in India is funding this chair or funding this program, or this conference is named after them, or something like that. And so, it makes it legitimate.
Yeah, they're
And
giving that
so
validation. Yes.
it's a legitimizing
Mm.
the if the Indian icons legitimize all this work at Harvard, you've given them a blank check to do whatever the heck they want in
Yeah.
your name. And I think that's very risky and dangerous for the Indian billionaires. I hope they see us as providing a service to bring some problems to their attention as red flags that they better investigate.
Yes, no, absolutely. So you've covered a lot with what's happening in the USA. So can you describe, because a lot of this toxic discourse has been imported into India. Can you give some examples of that?
So part one is the discourse and who produces it and all of that, the Marxism inside, the critical race theory, caste theory, all that. And
Yeah.
part two is the Harvard as the snake nest, the incubator, which is being funded by our own people, ironically. And then part three is all of this reflects in India.
Yes.
Harvard exports its liberal arts to Ashoka University, for example. There is Azim Premji has a university that is very aligned with these movements. Tata Institute of Social Sciences, TIS, brings a lot of social sciences models that are developed in the United States. Godrej Cultural Labs. So there are large number of establishments in India that we have discussed in our book, where the model of social sciences is not based on Indian ideas. The liberal arts is not based on the metaphysics that is a Vedic metaphysics, but Western metaphysics, Western ideas, which are basically Marxist, ideas of society, ideas of class struggle, ideas of minorities, racism, and so on. So whatever is the latest fashion in the West that is legitimized by Harvard with the help of our billionaires, then gets exported to Indian establishments that are very proud to be aligned with this. Ashoka University is very proudly saying that we are the Harvard of India. Okay, so they are the Harvard of India. Absolutely correct. They are the Harvard of India. So the good, the bad, the ugly, all part of it. Harvard has some good things. If Indians were to engage Harvard on STEM, the technology, the medicine, the engineering, that Harvard is phenomenal in physics, in all sorts of technologies. And if India were to say we're going to fund that and not fund their human rights and social justice, that would be great. And that's what China is doing. China is sucking knowledge out of Harvard and other places like that, which are technology, which are going to make China great. And they don't want at all China to deal with, Harvard to deal with Chinese domestic affairs. They don't want social justice, human rights, what's happening with LGBTQ, what's happening with minorities in Tibet or in, all these different provinces, Hong Kong, wherever. They don't want that to be the discourse at Harvard, and Harvard is obeying them. Harvard obeys what China tells them to. But in India's case, the Indians do not set the agenda at Harvard. So once this is all established at Harvard, it's franchised into India. And so Indian universities are doing this, taking this over. Another thing that's happening is Harvard has its people in policy making positions and committees at Niti Aayog, which is the central planning commission in India. That's the government planning commission in India. And they have Harvard faculty there. And the Harvard faculty wearing one hat, very patriotic, trying to be helping India in public policy on water or energy or whatever, sounds very nice. And I'm sure they're doing good work also. But on the other hand, the same person is wearing this other hat in the United States in Harvard, having all these conferences with ultra left people being nurtured. So our book exposes that. It says that, and we are naming names, by the way. We are not afraid to name names, and we are more than happy to sit down and have discussions with them in an amicable way. And if we are wrong, we are wrong. We will correct ourselves and apologize. But we would also like them to know what our ammunition is, what our data is, because in this book, we have over 1,600 endnotes. It's a 900-page book almost, 1,600 endnotes, and more than 400 references in the bibliography. So it's a highly researched and referenced book. And we are more than happy to have people take it apart and give us their view, and we'll sit down with them and debate.
Wow. That is really an offer out there. Now, your book is such an expose. If you had a chance to give Prime Minister Modi ji any advice on your findings, what would you
No.
request him to do?
Well, first of all, I have been offering my services as an informal advisor to not only Mr. Modi, Prime Minister Modi, whom I respect a lot, but whichever ministry wants to listen to me. And I must say that on a personal level, they're all very nice to me. They're very generous. They're very polite, and they invite me and we talk nicely. But in terms of the ideas and the proposals, many things I'm mentioning in this book, I've been talking about for a decade, and nobody has really done anything about it. So I'm not going to go around one more time. I've stopped going around and begging and requesting an audience. If they want, they can call me and I'll be happy to help them. But I'm not going to solicit anything. I'm not going to go around asking that, hey, put me in this committee, I can advise you. The whole national education policy is messed up, and we criticize it quite a lot. But I had nothing to do with it. I mean, so we didn't have an opportunity to be party to that. And so this NEP imports Harvard's liberal arts into the Indian education system. That's how serious it is. So on the one hand, people like you, me, many others, we are fighting the anti-India and Hindu phobia that comes out of the academy, and that comes out of liberal arts premises and structures. On the other hand, India is importing that very thing as sort of the latest fashion in the Indian education system. And the entire curriculum in Ashoka University is based on Harvard liberal arts, and the NEP 2020 opens the floodgates, and Harvard has expanded and put up its offices in Delhi, Mumbai, and they are training lots of people, and Indians are lapping it up. So the Indian prime ministers, if they were to ask me, or any other think tank, if they were to ask me, I would first have them read the book. I would want them to have it evaluated independently by their people. I would like to come and give them seminars and conferences, and I will give them a few very actionable things they can do to help India to get rid of this dismantling India, dismantling Hindutva, dismantling Modi, dismantling the Indian government and constitution. All these dismantling movements, which somebody like Jaishankar, the external affairs minister, a brilliant guy, he's having to fight this one at a time. But he's fighting when it's too late, when it's already some US Secretary of State comes and he gives a lecture on human rights to India and how India is ill-treating its minorities, and Jaishankar hits back. But that's reactive. They have to go upstream and say, where is it coming from? Who's the snake nest? Where is it being produced? And they have to rebuttal it at that level, which is what we're doing. So we are available to anybody who wants to listen. And if the prime minister or any other ministry, they really became serious and wanted to listen, we would be more than happy to give them our knowledge. This book, so big, is only 10% of all the material we have. I mean, it would take so many volumes to put out all the knowledge we have. So this is the opening salvo, if you will, to start the ball rolling towards the Breaking India 2.0 revolution that we want. And then as there is traction, we have a lot more to say.
Yes, I mean, like you've really started a movement of awakening and educating Hindus, especially with Breaking India, a decade ago. That really set the dominoes tumbling. So people are awake, people are educated, but how do we get them active, Rajiv ji?
So, the thing is that we can learn from the opposing side how they're doing things. So they have thinkers and think tanks which are producing knowledge, and we consider ourselves as Infinity Foundation to be that way. And then dovetail with this are activists who take this knowledge into the public, and we would like to work with other activists. I shouldn't have to go and be my own activist. Others should take this knowledge. But unfortunately, in India, every activist wants to be decoupled from the source from which he's borrowed. They want to borrow all the knowledge from us and not acknowledge it. and claim it's their own and try to become their own scholar. So with every activist wanting to become their own scholar, recycling the same old knowledge, what happens is the public gets the same stuff from 100 different channels, okay? And they are not organized. They're not organized as an ecosystem that is mutually supporting each other. So we don't get all the support needed to do the work. We could do 10 times as much work as we are doing in terms if we had more resources. And the on the other hand, the activists are out of date because they're not connected with the think tanks. They're trying to figure it out on their own. So all the time, people are now still misdiagnosing where the Hindu phobia is coming from, because they're picking the small fry here and there. They're picking some little thing here, there, and they're making a big deal out of it, but they haven't gone and dug deep the way we have. And this book is only the tip of the iceberg. We have a lot more to say. So to really become effective, we need to first have a community where we respect each other internally, each other's specialties, honor each other. I want to be feeding the activists with all the knowledge on a regular basis. Maybe we should have a workshop to train our own activists the way our opponents do. And then they should refer to us. They should reference our works and not cut us out. Yeah. So once we have this thinkers and activists aligned, okay, then we can go into policy making. Policy making is the next step. We have to create policies and then lobby well-written, well-drafted policies, lobby to put them into various, whether it's the courts, whether it's the Indian Parliament, whether it is the international bodies like the UN and European Union, British Parliament, US government, all the places where policies are being sought after. We need to have policies being produced. Just a lot of rabble rousing, everybody wanting to get views and hits and become famous is a tamasha, is like a big pageantry, but that doesn't produce results. So we really do not have our own house in order in terms of an ecosystem that works, taking the strengths of everybody, all kinds of strengths, and harmonizing them. So it's an internal job, I think, that we need to do in terms of managing our own teams and resources better.
Rajivji, thank you so much. This sounds like a wonderful book. The viewers, I'm sure, are eager to get their hands on a copy. They would have to go to, is it the www.snakesoftheganga.com?
Snakes in the Ganga. www.snakesintheganga.com. And you go there, you can pre-order in India in rupees, outside India in dollars. The book is going to be launched September 26th in Delhi. We have 3 members of parliament. We have other very important speakers. And then this will be in Chinmay Mission Hall in Delhi. Everybody's invited. And then on the 30th, another event is happening at Vivekananda International Foundation. We have several military people, generals, admirals, from the top military, and also foreign affairs, the foreign secretary level of people we have coming there. And then we go to the south, we go to Bangalore, we have 5 or 6 events with very important people. And we go to Chennai, again, IIT Madras and all sorts of important places. And then we go to Ahmedabad. So we want to come back by Diwali home to the US, and then we'll do North America. We're going to Toronto, New York, California, Texas, Chicago, all kind of places. Yeah. And then in January, we go back to India for a second tour because we want many other cities we couldn't accommodate. And we'd love to do a tour in Europe.
Yes, I look forward to that. I hope to see you in the UK very soon. And I'm sure this book will be even a bigger success than Breaking India. Rajiv, thank you so much for your time today and for launching your book to the audience here for the very first time, premiering on Chitti Media. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure. You asked some really good questions, and I'm glad that you did ask those very sharp, pointed, direct questions. Thank you so much for helping getting our message out. And namaste to everybody.
It's an honor. Thank you. Thank you, Jai Shri Krishna. Thank you.
Namaste. We hope you enjoyed this Chitti Media content. Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.